the other thing I found about AI is that AI is actually very good at making front ends. And
Yeah,
interesting, kind of
I
bad.
actually built a tool that builds web apps for you, like Cursor, inside of Total using AI. And it's like for my community. And I'm always scared looking at my Claude invoice every month a little bit, but
Well,
because
and
they
there,
use it.
yep. And the new MCP stuff I'm finding to be very interesting too. That's something I want to be getting more into in the course of January.
But yeah, I mean, like I think no code is like moving into slowly into AI more because like every time I look at Twitter, those people that said no code, no code, no code, they're all like cursor, cursor, cursor. Wherever I look, it's bolt.new, it's cursor, people doing React stuff, don't knowing React, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's only all that. So the okay, so like you and I have been chatting a little bit back and forth about doing a podcast, vidcast, whatever.
Yeah.
So where's your head at? How can we experiment with this and figure out what's gonna work? And I probably by doing, right? But then okay, then what's our first step to the doing to be able to do those
I mean,
experiments?
I think this is a great first episode so far, right? Like, don't you agree? Like, this is like, like, I don't know, it's like no code gossip or something.
Yes. The okay, I mean that's a fair point too. Um so
We don't
the
have this in the no code industry. There's like weekly AI news, there's weekly no code news, right?
there is and who does a good job keeping track of Benoit actually does a pretty good job keeping track of like what's new in the world of no code in particular.
Oh, I don't know that.
And from NC Scale.
I know NC Scale, yes.
Right. And Benoit's the founder over there.
He does it
Uh
on YouTube?
no, he has a newsletter. I guess this
Oh,
like
but nobody does it in like an entertainment format.
well, actually I think that now we get to like create with, right? The guys who ran No Code UK. Like
Oh,
James and Ash and Kieran. They're doing they're making some content out of this stuff, and I think going at it from a certain level. And then there's a question of like what we want to be doing that's a little bit different from all that. And like what's gonna be maximum Yassine, I guess. Like what's very Yassine about it, what's very Ray about it. Because at the end of the day, that's
like
gonna be the best
I'm the one always, like excited about everything and then racist, there's going to be a lot of security implementations about that and you gotta make sure this like the data is secure and I already built the prototype and then I gotta go back and make it secure.
Yep. Right. So I sort of think that there can be like it can be a little bit newsy, but that'll actually give it a pretty short shelf life.
That's a good
Um,
point.
I
Because
think there's a bit of a like what is the topic of the day that matters, and I think that if what we have are things that are sort of driven by the topic, then that also creates more it is more useful to folks, right, over a
right.
longer term. And doesn't it's not about like, hey, how do you go build a thing? I mean, we both made those kinds of videos, but like, what's how do you think about a thing? Like, what's going on in a particular market, especially if where we've got very different perspectives on it.
Right. I mean, maybe a good topic is something that happened today is people think very differently about enterprise no code, which I found. So most companies, and this is always a shock to me when companies come to developers, they have the notion still that no code is cheaper than ordinary development, which is not true. I think
Yeah.
ordinary development is cheaper than no code because of Cursor, because of Windsurf, because of Lovable. I think making something an app in React is way cheaper than making something in Toddle or making something in WeWeb. Don't you agree?
I think can be. I think there are a few factors involved, right? So one is
Right.
going to be the cost of labor,
Yes,
and
I'm
the
talking about the cost of labor. That was something a discussion I had today, because people still think you can get a mobile, you can get like a web application built in a no-code tool for like I don't know 10,000 or 8,000, and that is if you have someone from Africa doing it now. Like the price is how no-code changed. It's like it's not 10,000 to have someone from the US do it. It's like 10,000 if you want someone from Africa or someone from any other lower income country, Philippines. That's the prices you get over there. if you compare that with the Next.js cost, you can get someone in there for starting at 2,000, 3,000 to build you a Next.js app, right? Because there's more talent in those countries driving down the prices for those big frameworks. And then there are two people in that whole country knowing Toddle, or three people in that country knowing WeWeb, which will increase your prices. So people think, it's cheaper to go no code than normal code. And that is, in terms of labor, not true, even if you go to the United States, because there are more qualified Next.js developers than qualified Toddle developers, driving the price down for Next.js developers, increasing the prices for Toddle developers or no code, any tool, because it is domain specific knowledge. That's why, the WIST agencies, most of them charge 200,000, 150,000 to build a WIST web application.
Yeah. No, you put your finger on it. There's difference between what's the total cost and what's the unit cost. And
Yes.
total cost is going to be the product of your unit cost times number of hours required. The idea of no code is that it will take fewer hours.
Yeah.
And but it's also true that like if you use, a framework that more people have knowledge of, it will be lower cost on a per hour basis.
Yes.
And the argument for no code, or sort of in general for like going down that kind of road, is that you want to have fewer hours. Fewer hours means shorter time frame, and shorter time
Yeah.
frame means you get to learn from the market a lot faster. And
Exactly.
that, and so I think the real competitor is going to be less what's the total outlay, and a little bit more what is the span of time, what's the elapsed
Right.
time, right,
Right.
between hey, I've got an idea and being able to get that idea in front of the market and be able to have a learning loop to be able to circle
Right.
back around on that. And this also leads back to like why you might not want to hire someone who's from halfway around the world, not because they're less talented and not because they don't know as much, but because the longer the distance and the further across time zones, the more friction there is in
Right.
communication, right, of the
And
business stuff.
sometimes you want to point at things on the whiteboard and say, no, I want this to be here. Sometimes there is not just like a barrier of communication, if you are doing remote work, but also like a barrier of culture, maybe, maybe there are different things how people approach it. I found, for example, when working with people overseas, the UI is going to look different than if you were to work with someone from the United States, for example. Like it's going to look different. Not saying it's going to look bad, because the people overseas started using ChatCN UI and all those frameworks, and it looks now similar to it looks almost the same because they're using the same boilerplates. But before we had those, you could see which one was made in which country.
Right. I think what you're getting at is correct. And something I've heard from a number of people who've gotten frustrated by building with low-code tools is like, wait, this was supposed to drive down my costs, and it didn't.
Yes,
And
it
it really
doesn't.
it's a question you use more expensive labor in order and use less of it when it's done correctly. It's one of
Yeah,
the reasons why I would tell people you never want to be pigeonholing yourself as a quote unquote no code developer because that's like the worst of both worlds. The what I would look for is someone who looks more like a business consultant who understands
yeah,
the domain knowledge, the business domain knowledge, and then is able to
exactly.
connect that with the software. That's the person who's going to be able to make bank with their
Yeah,
with their practice, partially because they are creating a whole lot more value. And this gets to the enterprise question, right? The enterprise question is, who am I going to give this to? And when I have been in enterprise contexts, talking about, low code development or helping them run, it's because the people who I'm working with are the business people, and the promise of low code has been how
yeah,
we can get these business people to directly create software that meaningfully improves the business rather than
yeah.
having to go either to an outside agency or put burdens on their
You want to
internal.
turn the employees of a company that know everything about the company into the people that are able to build the software, because they know everything about the problems they have. The only language they need to learn is how to build software for that specific problems. Because if you're going to go to a developer and you'll tell them, this is my problem. The developer doesn't understand that specific problem because they don't have that experience. And if you help someone get that experience in building those things with already the domain specific experience, you're going to turn them into super software developers. They're going to be able to find the solutions that a developer wouldn't find. And that's like where no code adds the value, because you can also then own the artifact. So you could even have someone else build it, and then you have that framework that's always going to be the same, that you can log in and you can make changes and you can do that. But I think that's actually less of a sales point for no code. No code is more like the initial way I looked at low code was I'll do it cheaper for you. That was how I started. But then the more I used it, the more I looked at it, it was like, no, I can teach you how to do this and you can do it yourself. And that's actually the better way of approaching those things, I found, because it's going to make them more happy with the end result.
Yes. Speed and ownability are often the way I would
Yeah,
describe it. And not cost. Cost is not in there. Um, but
exactly.
but speed and ownability really do matter. If you can own it and then you're able to modify it afterwards, if you can
Right.
get it, more quickly because you're going from idea to, being able to execute on it, there's so much more that we can accomplish. And a
And it's
lot of
interesting. It's interesting. I always look at Twitter and there are always the people saying, I need a Bubble developer, full time, $1,850. I was like, ooh, poor Bubble developer. I mean, probably for, and this probably then gets more people from lower income countries to there. So agencies use that it's a thought that no code has to be cheaper than code, and the agencies that are going to like really use the situation of having cheap labor from other countries are the agencies that are selling lower costs compared to ordinary development. Mainly the agencies actually built on by non-technical founders, because if they were technical founders they would advertise it differently. But the lot of no-code agencies saying, oh, it's the cheaper way to do it, and their whole sales pitch is cheaper. But and then they have to have cheaper labor, and they're going to have cheaper output and cheaper quality results, right? And that's going that it kind of like cost the whole bad reputation of no code initially. And then you're going to pay probably 20,000 for something someone paid 1,800 for, because that's the only way how you can make it profitable enough to cover the risk of hiring people. So you really drive down the prices in no code, and that's why, things like Bubble happened.
Well, yeah, the thing when I hear that story, it's the same story though that happened with building React-based apps, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You source people from places with lower cost of living. You basically spend a dime on them to make a dollar from the client. And the and that push down of costs is still happening, right? It's
Right.
not really about no code versus not. To your point, there can be a pitch of how like no code could be a less expensive thing or what have you.
Right. It's
Uh,
just if those agencies that are selling mainly on price have to push the cost more down than the React agencies that already are pushing down the cost, if that makes sense. So at the end, the developer gets less for basically doing the same work.
I think that's probably true. And it's actually sort of, we sort of talked about this in the context of enterprise, no code
Yeah.
and like, what they're really buying. We sort of transitioned to talking about how the agency model is working. But I think it also kind of leads to a question of like, what does career development look like if you are,
Yeah.
in the space? And my thinking on this is that there's a certain amount of getting comfortable with software and getting comfortable with computers that matters. But one thing I'm hearing a lot of people say when they are getting into, for example, no code is like, oh yeah, I remember this from school. Not remember no code. They remember coding. And so
Yes.
but it just hasn't been something they've done in a while. When I first entered the market, that wasn't true for people who were, around me. Like the number of people who knew their way around computer code just, wasn't nearly as high, but it's much higher now. And it's
Yeah.
not what they're doing with their careers, right? They've gone, hey, they were doing some coding, but now they're doing marketing, or now they're doing,
Right.
finance or whatever. But now that they see it again, they're like, oh yeah, I get it. Now, if you
Yes.
make that bridge short enough between that thing they kind of almost get, which is the code part, and their connection with their work and how they can be expressing their expertise as software,
Yeah.
there is a huge amount of value that they can then create. And I think that becomes really the promise of the tools. And that means it's not about like the what of, oh, we got to make it super friendly so anybody can use it. The thing is, from a demographic point of view, we're kind of primed to be ready for much broader adoption of software creation tooling. It's just got to
Yeah.
be easier. And that's not just about being visual, that's about
Right.
being easy and fast. And that's something now that like AI can be doing in addition to the more
Right.
visual type tools.
Right. I had one in my community in office hours, Cleveland, and he is like he used to be he is like financial specialist, but he also is very great at social media and he knows how to build an audience. He used to make like videos about, how you have to deal with your finances because before all the sketchy people happened on YouTube and all that. So he really knows what he's doing. He managed like financial portfolios for his living, but he was really good at building an audience. And because he really was good at building audiences, what he's building is right now in no code. Or he first started using React and AI to build it, and he was paying, I think, like 5,000 a month for development team and all that stuff. And he burned through a lot of cash to build it, and the product still wasn't working. So when he found, I think he first found Wist, and then through Wist, he gave that up, and he found me, and then he came to Toddle, which is kind of like a lot of stories how people find me. And then he found Toddle and he was like, oh, that's so simple. And he's almost done. He built the Facebook integration with Facebook OAuth to get the user's access token to post on their behalf. And now he's working on scheduling and all that stuff. But he
Cool.
does have that experience in that specific domain. So he knows everything about social media. He's an expert at that. And now he is building this tool for content creators based on his own experience. And because it is so visual and he can use some of the thinking principles that he knew from Next.js/React, because Toddle is really Reactian, how it thinks with runtime props, all that stuff, right? So he can take that knowledge, that principles that he didn't understand, but he learned from communicating with his developers and hacking a little bit around himself with Windsurf and Lovable and all those tools, and apply them now in a visual principle where for him it's way easier to get unstuck himself. And we can always do that in a few minutes in office hours as well, because it's just colorful blocks that you got to put together and maybe write a little bit of custom code he's already familiar with, right? So that's what I found is you can have domain experts, meaning, for example, content creators build software for other content creators. And that is going to make them a lot of money because they understand that market and they know how to solve those problems properly.
That's it. I mean, that's the
And that's kind of like what I did with Despia, because I have been making mobile apps, at least wrapper mobile apps, or using mobile app wrappers since 3 years about, and I was sick and tired of using them because they were all bad and they were junky and they were slow and capacitors terrible and like there's just like or you can't do Google OAuth because it opens the Google page in the web view and it's just a terrible experience working with wrappers. So on my frustration, I put that together. I got someone else who's way smarter than me when it comes to the native part. And we built this tool, and I focused on making the technology work on the back end and all that stuff. He came up with the native part. And we built this tool that's going to let you make mobile apps make you turn your web apps into mobile apps, but it solves all the problems that I had myself because I already had the domain expertise, or in this case, the domain frustration of working with the conversion of web to mobile and working with hybrid frameworks. And then I was able to build that. I spent 8 months building that in Wisp, and then it still wasn't working. And then I rebuilt everything in 2 weeks inside of Total. And Andreas was very happy, and he said, "We got to make a case study." So, they're going to firing a little bit against Wisp now with that case study.
yep.
I have nothing to do with that. It's all them.
Okay. I mean, we sort of, went a little bit around the horn there in like a, 20 minute segment. Um, that actually feels like a decent chunk for something to be done as a vidcast, something that can be chaptered up
Yeah.
into these 4 segments, and then and then we can see about, being able to ship it,